What if one of the most important questions a Christian could ever face is a question most believers never seriously think about until it is too late? Imagine it is 2 a.m. You hear a crash downstairs. Your heart begins to race. Your children are sleeping. Your spouse wakes up terrified. Someone is inside your home. At that moment, what would God want you to do? Would He want you to stand aside and do nothing? Would He want you to protect your family? Would defending them be an act of faith or an act of sin? For centuries, Christians have debated this issue. Some believe followers of Jesus should never use force under any circumstances. Others believe God calls His people to protect innocent lives. Both sides quote Scripture. Both sides claim biblical support. But what if the answer is far deeper than most people realize? What if Jesus' words about turning the other cheek have been misunderstood by many believers? What if protecting someone from evil can actually be an expression of love? Before you decide what you believe, stay with me until the very end, because today's journey through Scripture may challenge assumptions you have held for years, and by the end you may see self-defense through an entirely different lens. What most Christians believe about self-defense. Ask 10 Christians whether self-defense is a sin, and you may hear 10 different answers. Some immediately answer yes. They point to Jesus' command, "If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." Others immediately answer no. They point to passages about protecting the innocent and defending the weak. Why is there so much disagreement? Because many people focus on one group of verses while ignoring another. Some emphasize peace, others emphasize protection. Some emphasize mercy, others emphasize justice. But the Bible consistently teaches all of these values simultaneously. God is loving. God is merciful. God is patient. Yet God is also just. God protects the weak. God opposes evil. God defends the oppressed. The challenge is learning how these truths fit together. Many people assume that Christian love means becoming passive, but Jesus was not passive. He was gentle, but He was not weak. He was compassionate, but He was not timid. He forgave sinners, yet He confronted hypocrisy. He loved His enemies, yet He stood firmly against evil. Christianity has never been a call to cowardice. It has always been a call to courage directed by God's wisdom. That distinction changes everything. Bible verses often used in self-defense. Let's begin with the verses most commonly used to argue against self-defense. Matthew 5:39. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. This is perhaps the most quoted verse in the entire discussion. At first glance, it appears simple. Someone hits you. Do not hit back, but context matters. In the culture of Jesus' day, a slap on the right cheek was often an insult. It was intended to humiliate and dishonor. Jesus was addressing personal retaliation. He was teaching His followers not to seek revenge over insults, humiliation, or personal offenses. He was challenging pride. He was attacking the human desire to get even. The focus is revenge, not the protection of innocent life. Jesus was teaching believers to absorb personal insults rather than escalating conflict. Matthew 5:44. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. This teaching is revolutionary. Jesus commands believers to love people who hate them. He commands prayer instead of bitterness, forgiveness instead of revenge, mercy instead of hatred. But notice something important. Loving an enemy does not necessarily mean allowing that enemy to harm others. Imagine someone attacking a child. Would love mean standing aside, or would love mean stopping the attack while still refusing to hate the attacker? Love and protection are not always opposites. Romans chapter 12, verse 19. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. Again, Paul focuses on revenge, personal vengeance, getting even, settling scores. The Bible consistently condemns revenge because revenge belongs to God, but protecting life and seeking revenge are not identical actions. One seeks safety, the other seeks retaliation. Understanding that distinction is essential. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 23. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. Jesus endured incredible suffering. He could have called down judgment. He could have destroyed his enemies instantly. Yet he chose the path of sacrifice. Why? Because his mission was redemption. His death was part of God's plan for salvation. This verse demonstrates Christ's willingness to endure suffering for a greater purpose. But it does not necessarily mean every Christian must permit every act of violence in every circumstance. Bible verses that support protection and defense. Now let's examine passages that point toward protection and defense. Exodus 22:2. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. This verse surprises many Christians. God's law recognized the right of protection during a home invasion. Why? Because during a nighttime intrusion, the threat level is unknown. The homeowner cannot determine the attacker's intentions. The principle is clear. Human life has value. Protecting innocent life matters. Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 17 to 18. When Jerusalem's walls were being rebuilt, enemies threatened constant attack. The workers carried building materials in one hand and weapons in the other. Think about that image. God's people prayed. God's people trusted God. Yet God's people also prepared themselves. Faith did not eliminate responsibility. Trust in God did not mean ignoring danger. Psalm 82:4. Rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. God repeatedly commands his people to defend vulnerable individuals, the weak, the oppressed, the helpless, the innocent. Protection is deeply rooted in God's character. The command to rescue implies action. Sometimes evil must be confronted in order to protect victims. What Jesus really meant by turn the other cheek. When Jesus said, turn the other cheek, he was not creating a universal rule requiring believers to permit unlimited violence. He was addressing personal retaliation. In that culture, a slap was often an insult intended to establish dominance. Jesus challenged the cycle of pride and revenge. He taught believers not to mirror evil behavior. Not every wrong requires retaliation. Not every insult requires a response. Not every offense requires revenge. Jesus was teaching radical humility, but humility is not the same as helplessness. Imagine a firefighter entering a burning building. Imagine a police officer stopping an attacker. Imagine a father shielding his child from danger. Protection can be motivated by love rather than revenge. The key issue is the heart. Are you acting from hatred or are you acting from love? That distinction changes everything. Can a Christian protect their family? Suppose someone threatens your family. What should you do? Scripture places tremendous value on caring for and protecting one's household. In 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 8, Paul writes, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith. While this verse primarily addresses provision, it reflects a broader principle of responsibility. God entrusts families to our care. Protection is part of that stewardship. Imagine a shepherd. A shepherd feeds sheep. A shepherd guides sheep. A shepherd protects sheep. If a wolf attacks the flock, does the shepherd walk away? No, a loving shepherd intervenes. Jesus himself described himself as the good shepherd. A shepherd's love includes protection. Parents instinctively understand this. Most parents would place themselves between danger and their children without hesitation. That protective instinct reflects something deeply embedded in God's design. Biblical examples of godly people defending others. The Bible contains numerous examples of righteous individuals intervening to protect others. Abraham rescues Lot. In Genesis 14, Abraham learned that Lot had been captured during a military conflict. Abraham assembled trained men and pursued the captors. He fought, he rescued Lot, he returned safely. Scripture does not condemn Abraham's actions. David protects Israel. David fought against Goliath not for personal glory, but to defend God's people. The giant threatened Israel. David stepped forward. His courage protected an entire nation. Throughout Scripture, courage in defense of others is often portrayed positively. When self-defense becomes sin, now we reach an extremely important balance. The Bible may support protection, but not every act labeled self-defense is righteous. Sometimes self-defense becomes sinful. How? When it is driven by hatred. Jesus warned against hatred. Hatred corrupts the heart. A person may begin by protecting themselves and end by seeking revenge. The motive matters. When it becomes revenge, once the danger has passed, continued aggression becomes vengeance. The Bible consistently condemns revenge. Protection ends when the threat ends. Anything beyond that enters dangerous territory. When pride takes control, some people are eager to fight because they feel insulted. They confuse wounded pride with legitimate danger. Jesus specifically challenged this attitude. A bruised ego is not justification for violence. When force becomes excessive, the purpose of self-defense is protection, not punishment. The goal is safety, not retaliation. When someone delights in causing harm, the heart has already moved away from God's will. Real-life scenarios every Christian should consider. Consider a few situations. Scenario 1. Someone insults you publicly. Should you fight back? Jesus would likely say no. Respond with grace. Respond with wisdom. Refuse revenge. Scenario 2. A stranger attacks an elderly person in front of you. Should you intervene? Most believers would say yes. Love for the victim demands action. Scenario 3. Someone breaks into your home and threatens your children. Would protecting them be sinful? Many Christians believe protecting innocent family members is not only permissible but responsible. Scenario 4. Someone harms you and later apologizes. Should you forgive them? Absolutely. Forgiveness is central to Christianity. Forgiveness, however, does not eliminate the need for wisdom or appropriate boundaries. These scenarios reveal an important truth. Biblical ethics are often more nuanced than simple slogans. The Christian life is not about becoming weak. It is about becoming Christ-like. Christ was full of grace. Christ was full of truth. Christ forgave sinners. Christ defended the vulnerable. Christ loved perfectly. And that is our calling as well. Let's know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more Bible-based teaching.